beautiful introduction to the text which says, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. It was obvious that we were tuning in to something that could hardly be regarded as crazy, no matter how unexpected it was.
This is a course in miracles. It is a required course. Only the time that you take it is voluntary. Free will does not mean that you can establish the curriculum. It means only that you can elect what you want to take at a given time. The course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. The opposite of love is fear. But what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. This course can therefore be summed up very simply in this way. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.
On that first morning when Helen came up, she was in quite a state. She could hardly talk. Her voice was almost inaudible. And I kept saying to Helen, don't worry about what it says. Just read it to me, then we can look at it later. It doesn't matter. No one will have to know. We'll tear it up. We'll do whatever is necessary. But just read it to me. And it was very difficult for her to even do that. She would cough and sputter and almost have a seizure rather than being able to simply read the words calmly. Sometimes I would use one hand holding on to her while I was trying to type with the other hand. And that extreme anxiety continued for a while, certainly during the early phases of the text when we encountered something like the first 50 principles on miracles.
Miracles as such do not matter. The only thing that matters is their source, which is far beyond evaluation. Miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. The real miracle is the love that inspires them. In this sense, everything that comes from love is a miracle.
The term miracle was one that bothered me at first. I think it bothered Helen too. The idea of a course in miracles seemed rather absurd. Yet when it defined a miracle as removing the barriers to our awareness of love's presence, it then began to make sense.
Miracles reawaken the awareness that the spirit, not the body, is the altar of truth. This is the recognition that leads to the healing power of the miracle. Miracles are natural signs of forgiveness. Through miracles, you accept God's forgiveness by extending it to others.
I realized as we continued typing up these first 50 principles with all the difficulties of getting it down and all the anxiety and so forth, that I would have to really change my mind about absolutely everything if this were true. And that seemed like a very big job. I wasn't sure I was up to it. And later I realized it's only a little willingness that is necessary. Readiness does not imply mastery, simply some willingness for change. So I recognized I had some willingness to do that. Helen was fearful, I think, of making any kind of very specific commitment about this. As a matter of fact, she said, you're responsible for what it says. I don't want to know exactly what it says, but if it makes any grammatical errors, if it goofs in any way, then it's had it, and I will refuse to continue.
A major contribution of miracles is their strength in releasing you from your false sense of isolation, deprivation, and lack. A miracle is never lost. It may touch many people you have not even met and produce undreamed of changes in situations of which you are not even aware.
After I typed up whatever Helen might have dictated during a particular day, we would go back over the copy, checking carefully to be sure that we had all of the words exactly the way they were supposed to be. Helen at times was tempted to change a word, and then she would recognize that if she did that, it would not make sense later, so that her integrity in recording this material precisely as it came was extraordinary. She simply chose not to associate herself with it because of its high threat value at that time. She certainly did know what the material said, and she did understand it.
I would feel the writing coming on almost daily, and sometimes several times a day. Evenings turned out to be a favorite time for dictation. I objected bitterly to this and often went to bed defiantly without writing anything. But I could not sleep. Eventually, I got up in some disgust and wrote as directed. I never knew when I started a sentence how it would end, and the ideas came so quickly that I had trouble keeping up with them.
Helen could turn it on or off at any time. She could stop in the middle of a sentence without even going back to reread what she had written and continue when she had a moment. She could have a research conference in mid-sentence. It made no difference at all. The flow of the material continued without any altered state. Helen at no time was in a trance or anything remotely resembling a trance.
You may believe that you are responsible for what you do, but not for what you think. The truth is that you are responsible for what you think, because it is only at this level that you can exercise choice. What you do comes from what you think. Do not try to look beyond yourself for truth can only be within you.
At the time the course began, I would have termed myself an agnostic. I really had no interest in formal religion, but I was also aware of the deficiencies in the psychological systems of thought with which I was familiar. And I recognized that somehow the emperor had no clothes, that there were so many of us going around expounding our various theoretical points of view, but there was no one who really knew how to put this together in a meaningful way to change the nature of our lives.
You have but two emotions, love and fear. One you made and one was given you. Each is a way of seeing, and different worlds arise from their different sights. See the love of God in you, and you will see it everywhere. Because it is everywhere. With love in you, you have no need except to extend it.
When the course began, I began to recognize that the two emotions, fear and love, which it talks about, were really the only two emotions that mattered. And that if I could learn to let go of fear, I would automatically experience love, because that is our natural reality. As I continue to practice letting go of my own defensiveness, I became aware that the course is really about undoing. It's about forgiveness, about forgiving ourselves and others for the mistakes that we have made, and not holding on to these in a way that increases our sense of guilt and unworthiness.
What could you want forgiveness cannot give? Do you want peace? Forgiveness offers it. Do you want happiness? A quiet mind? A certainty of purpose? And a sense of worth and beauty that transcends the world? Do you want care and safety and the warmth of sure protection always? All of this forgiveness offers you. Forgive the world, and you will understand that everything that God created cannot have an end. And nothing He did not create is real. In this one sentence is our course explained.
While the course came in a form which I had never anticipated, I did regard this as the answer to my question, there must be another way, and I'm determined to find it. And it seemed to me that to the extent I valued being a scientist, I should look at all the evidence before dismissing it. There was an initial reaction, can this be it? You know, is this something totally preposterous? But as I read the material, I recognized that Helen in no way could have written this material. It was totally alien to her background, to her interests, and her mode of conceptualizing abstract ideas, that there's no way she could have done this.
Where did the writing come from? I did not understand the calm but impressive authority with which the voice dictated. It is largely because of the strangely compelling nature of this authority that I have referred to the voice with a capital V. At several points in the writing, the voice itself speaks in no uncertain terms about the author, Jesus. My own reactions to these references, which literally stunned me at the time, have decreased in intensity and are now at a level of wonder and acceptance.
I do remember one occasion very keenly when Helen came in one day and she was really distraught. She was perhaps more distraught than I'd seen her in some time. And this was while we were perhaps somewhere in the middle of the text. And she said, this time it's really gone off the deep end. It's gibberish. It makes absolutely no sense, no meaning, nothing to it. It's absolutely impossible. I refuse to read it to you, and so forth. After I had calmed her down, why, she did agree to read the material to me. And I might quote the very end of that section. Forgive us our illusions, Father, and help us to accept our true relationship with you, in which there are no illusions and where none can ever enter. Our holiness is yours. What can there be in us that needs forgiveness when yours is perfect? The sleep of forgetfulness is only our unwillingness to accept your forgiveness and your love. Let us not wander into temptation, for the temptation of the Son of God is not your will. And let us receive only what you have given, and accept but this into the minds which you created and which you love. Amen. At that point, Helen burst into tears. The beauty of the language, the profundity of the thought And in a sense, the equivalence of the Lord's Prayer for the course seemed to be so clear that this was a statement in the course very similar to the Lord's Prayer in many of its dimensions. And it made a very profound impact on Helen, as well as, of course, on me.
Every once in a while, I mean, the frustration would reach the point that one or both would say in unison, why me or why us? I mean, what did we do to deserve this? And, but that passed, the import and the content of the course was making a great impression upon them. And the responsibility of the task was very important. And if anything, I think it increased over the years. I think they reached a point of at least some accommodation to it and some sense of comfort, simply out of the organization that they developed in handling the task of transcription in an orderly way. I attribute this largely to Bill. And it was necessary to sustain Helen with this framework, the discipline of this framework.
As the material developed, of course, a great deal of it became increasingly beautiful. Hundreds of pages are in iambic pentameter, Shakespearean blank verse, and when we discovered that, it was almost as if we were being given words and music at the same time.
Let us be still an instant and forget all things we ever learned, all thoughts we had, and every preconception that we hold of what things mean and what their purpose is. Let us remember not our own ideas of what the world is for. We do not know. Let every image held by everyone be loosened from our minds and swept away. Be innocent of judgment, unaware of any thoughts of evil or of good that ever crossed your mind of anyone. Now do you know him not, but you are free to learn of him, and learn of him anew. Now is he born again to you, and you are born again to him, without the past that sentenced him to die, and you with him. Now is he free to live, as you are free, because an ancient learning passed away and left a place for truth to be reborn.
The first part of the material that we worked on lasted for almost 3 years and ended up as a 622-page volume. We didn't know when we started what A Course in Miracles was going to be. We didn't know whether it might be a few pages, you know, whatever it was, we had no idea. But Helen did ask at one point, how will I know when this is over? And she was told, you will hear the word Amen. And that occurs at the very end of the text where it says, and now we say Amen.
There were times when they both felt pressured, tired, exhausted, or Helen was ill with a cold or a sinus infection, and nonetheless that didn't make any difference as far as the course was concerned. The material still came through.
When the text was finished, Helen felt, as I did, that that was the completion of our assignment and that we had plenty to do to simply try to learn those concepts and apply them in our lives. However, after a period of perhaps 9 months, Helen got increasingly restless. Then one day, she began to take down the workbook for students, which consists of 365 lessons, one for each day of the year. And that was the beginning of the second part of the course. That took approximately 2.5 years, and at the end of that, we again thought that we were finished, And after a number of months, again, of not being quite sure what would happen next, the third and final volume was announced as the Manual for Teachers. So the total period of time was approximately 7 years from the time we began with the text, including the workbook, and finally the Manual for Teachers.
The journey to God is merely the reawakening of the knowledge of where you are always and what you are forever. It is a journey without distance to a goal that has never changed. You dwell not here, but in eternity. You travel but in dreams, while safe at home.
By the fall of 1972, Helen and I had completed the Course in Miracles, with the exception of a clarification of terms section, which we added later. At that time, I decided to make about 12 Xerox copies of the course, keeping them, of course, hidden and secret, and available for those few people who might wander into our lives and really be interested and prepared for this material. I had no idea who they might be, and I certainly suspected that the number would be very small. Anyway, I had shared this with one of my graduate students, a Father Michael, and in the course of talking with him about